cartoonist directors talked about their crews and the artists they worked with, they always spoke of Treg Brown with great respect and were very quick to point out how much his work with sound had contributed to the cartoons.
Today in Malibu, California, a record-breaking sharp-nosed trowelfaz was caught by Mr. Treg Brown. Mr. Brown's only comment was, "'Twarn't nothing."
Now that's what I call a real fisherman, Father.
They credited him with editor, but I believe his role was he was a sound effects editor.
One of the important cogs in the studio machine is Treg Brown, head of the cutting department.
Now, Treg was a trained musician. He had his own orchestra. He played a multitude of instruments. He could read music.
He was essentially a musician to the end of his life. I mean, he began with Red Nichols' band, and he was with Benny Meroff, who was a very popular vaudeville band leader.
He was looking for a way during the Depression to earn a better living than a traveling musician playing in nightclubs.
Like this!
He got a job at Paramount, actually. First, he was offered a job as a music editor and sound editor and worked there for a short time. He actually worked for Cecil B. DeMille.
All right! How's the sound? Okie dokie, Chippy!
And produced some sound effects in some of DeMille's films in the early 30s, like Cleopatra and Sign of the Cross. Treg made up the sounds you hear of the bow twangs and for the arrows being fired in that movie.
Musicians made great cartoon sound editors because all cartoons are done on music bar sheets to rhythms. So Treg Brown understood, but it was like this guy just had an immediate genius for improving the quality of the Warner Brothers cartoon soundtracks to a motion picture level.
Usually the kind of sound effects that you heard in the earliest cartoons were strictly sound effects produced by musical instruments. What happened with Treg Brown was entirely different. He would bring in sounds that were recorded in the library at Warner Brothers. If someone came quick to a stop, he'd put in a car skid from, a Jimmy Cagney gangster movie that they had recorded. Somebody was hit on the head and flew out the window, there'd be a thunderclap, followed by the sound of a biplane in a spin recorded for Dawn Patrol. And it was this imposition of realistic sounds into the fantasy world of the cartoons which gave them comic impact.
That's why we got sound effects that were unusual, because Treg would try anything. The more offbeat they were, the funnier they were.
He was responsible for not only putting in the sound effects, but keeping the library of them and, in some cases, creating the library of them.
He went out into the field and he recorded things on a tape recorder, and transferred those to film loops, and then had built a whole sound effects library on film that he could cut in where he wanted it.
He recorded an actual live crowd at a bullfight in Barcelona. And of course the bull was a real bull. It wasn't a cartoon.
I think it was his wonderful imagination on the stage where we would record these effects. He had a very famous cabinet, and inside that cabinet was a myriad of what you and I might call junk.
Oh, the poor putty cat. His fingers all caught in the wire.
And he had such a wild imagination that he could create any kind of sound from what he had.
The Roadrunner had his little tongue blips. Treg said that they were produced by just snapping his finger in the top of a Coke bottle, and then you could cut a few of those together very quickly. There was a character, the kangaroo, which appeared in a number of cartoons, that had this twanging bounce to its feet. And And Treg produced that by taking a fingernail file, a metal fingernail file, and just putting it on the end of a table and twanging it. And you could move the file such that more of it hung out over the table or less, and you could vary the pitch.
He could make sound out of just nothing. I mean, he had a fabulous catalog of sounds that were just great.
They're still used so often on television and cartoons and in the Animaniacs and all the other subsequent Looney Tune kind of incarnations that there are certain sounds that just make kids laugh.
Daffy stamping out rabbit's footprints at the opening of the Rabbit Fire, Rabbit Seasoning, Duck Rabbit, Duck trilogy. It really sounds somehow like a rabbit's foot-shaped stamp being squished into ink and thumped on the ground.